Welcome to the Learn to Judge Beer livestream. Pour yourself a beer and join in as we cover everything from assessing and scoring beer through to identifying and fixing faults.
Good evening, and we're live on time this week. That's an improvement from last week, isn't it? You'll see there's three of us there. Now let me just pause this thing that's going on in the background. I don't need two audios. Right, where's that coming from? There we go. Anyway, there's three of us. Rich, do you want to introduce our guest for us?
We're joined this time by James from Manchester Homebrew, who I volunteered for this one because he drinks both coffee and beer. No other reason at all.
I made sure that he knew beforehand that I'm not generally a fan of espresso beers or coffee stouts, but yeah, I can find the faults on both ends of it.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, yes, it is an espresso beer this time. We thought we'd do something a bit different. One of the main ones you hear at... Now, I'm getting an echo. Is anyone else hearing that, or is it just me local? Because I've got everything else turned off, but it's definitely an echo there. Down. Item, audio.
Is it coming from any of us? Is it just a general echo?
Everything that's going out I'm hearing echoed, so it might just be picking up James's audio, but I'm not sure. Or it could be that somewhere, because it's got like a 5-second lag on it, so I'm wondering if it's if I've got a YouTube tab open somewhere. No. Yes, I have. That would explain it. Close 2 tabs. There was a third one hiding in the background. Right. Better.
Not that problem. Excellent. So, yeah, as everyone was saying, we're on a coffee beer this time. So we have this espresso stout from Hitachino, Nest, something like that. Japanese company. We've been around the UK for some time now. Hope everyone's got their beers ready.
And yeah, we're doing something a bit different because we're going for a 30A spice herb or veg. And if you're doing the exam, this will not be in the exam. They don't go above 27. But spice herb or veg is always a popular category at competitions. Popular amongst the entrants, not so popular amongst the judges.
When you're entering something in categories like this, you need to specify the base style. Usually you do that as another style from the style guide, though it's not 100% necessary that it is. There are some cases I've seen where it isn't. But usually you'll use another style from the style guides. In this case, we're looking at calling the base style 16D foreign export stout, or an extra stout. But we will discuss whether that's the right choice of base category as we go through this.
So yeah, what we'll be doing is looking for what extra the spice herb or veg edition brings to the beer on top of the basic 16D foreign extra stout style. So for foreign extra stout, I mean, obviously if you've had a look at the head already, it poured what I would call a nice head. It didn't last very long for me. What's everyone else's first impressions of the aroma though?
I just get closer. I just need to talk louder. Apparently I'm quite quiet.
So I'm getting a thing that I get on quite a few coffee beers, which is bell peppers. Bit of a musty bell pepper thing.
Yeah, Richard mentioned this to me when he said he had tasted the beer as well, so you're not the first person to say that.
So what's everyone else getting in the aroma? To stick what you're sensing in the chat.
Yep, so aroma is going to be scored out of 12 points. We'll worry about the points in a bit. But we're talking about the malt, the hops, the esters, and any other aromatics that you may be getting in the beer.
So if we're coming off the base style as the starting point, we're looking at Moderate high roast, light coffee, dark chocolate, or lightly burnt grain. Low to medium fruitiness, may have a sweet aroma, or molasses, licorice, dried fruit, or vinous aromas. Stronger versions can have a subtle clean aroma of alcohol. Low earthy, herbal, or floral, hop aroma optional. Low diastole optional. And yeah, we do have the same versions of the description. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. You can tell I was really out of practice last week because I managed to bring up the 2015 style guide instead of the 21. But yeah.
When you're judging these beers, while you're paying attention to that base style description, the beer doesn't have to be as close to it as you'd expect with a straight in that style beer, because when you're adding in extra ingredients, you will be changing the flavour, and things may happen during parts like the fermentation, which react to what the ingredients is. With coffee, probably not. But if, say, this was, well, not a spice herb vegetable, or you spice herb vegetable and you put in something like, say, rhubarb beer, that could have done something in the fermentation that's taken it further away from the original style.
Yep. So David's come in with, he was getting dark malt and coffee initially, but now all I can smell is bell peppers.
I'm sorry.
And this is a common thing when you're judging beers. You'll quite often hear someone say something across the table, and it's like suddenly everyone's smelling or tasting the same thing. Even if you're drinking a completely different beer to begin with, suddenly you're like, is that in there? and you're looking for anything that could pass as it. But let's see. Dark malts and coffee? Yeah. When you say dark malt, can you expand on that? What sort of aromas are you getting that you'll attribute to the dark malt?
In fact, both of those descriptors you can narrow down on, depending on how much you know about the various areas. Dark malt, obviously, you could go, are we in chocolate? Are we in, more coffee? Are we in the more caramelly roasty ends or dark raisins or something? And with coffee, depending on how you can talk about either the roast of the coffee, and light roast coffee is cool there. You can also talk about whether it's espresso or a more milky coffee drink, which turns up in some things like a milk stout, for example. You'd like to get some cappuccino or that sort of script is quite good often in there.
So one that I'd like to throw out there is I'm getting quite a sort of medicinal herb type thing. So what I mean by that is not as offensive as menthol, but just something that is fresh and not down the savoury avenue for the herbs.
I could definitely go with something on the verge of herbal, and little bit vegetable, but not really the veg at all. Yeah. So what we got? Tell me, we've got from David, sweet malt, like a very dark toast crust. Yeah, toast crust is a good descriptor with a hint of dark roast espresso coffee and chocolate end notes. Yeah, I like that.
That's very good, digging down into that and more detail on it, David. With the herb thing, yeah, I get it more on. So, how can I put it? You know, like you get an initial hit of aroma, and then sort of you get the tail end of it. I get it more in the tail end, that herby thing.
Yes, and I I know I think about flavors and smells in odd ways sometimes, but
We
I
all
find
do.
that it's almost adjacent to the that pepper aroma that I got. So it feels to me quite separate to the layers of malt. And someone said, I think Brian said black treacle. I can totally get black treacle there.
Yeah, that was a good one. Low musty chocolate or dark treacle from Brian T. Nice to see you join us, Brian.
So people think they can detect the coffee separately from as well as just the coffee-like elements of the roast malts.
Matthew's certainly saying he gets a light roast coffee. Do you think, like Rich has just said, do you think that's coming from the actual coffee or from the malt? Because both of them can give you elements of that. The darker roast the malt is, the darker or stronger or more bitter the coffee might be.
The other thing I would say around talking about the roast level of coffee as well is it can be quite hard sometimes because one person's dark roast is another person's medium roast. I think a lot of people think of dark roast as the sort of sticky black French roast coffee that you might get from Starbucks. Whereas once you get into more of the specialty realm, dark roast is almost the blonde roast that Starbucks do. So it's I would say that it's more towards that sort of more specialty dark roast rather than the French roast personally. I'm not getting any of the sort of almost burnt aromas that you might get in the very dark end.
And like everything, the process you use can actually have a big impact on flavours and aroma. If you cold brew a coffee, it can come across quite differently than if you bung it through an espresso machine or a French press or whatever.
Or dry bean your beer.
Yeah. Dry bean it in some bourbon.
How about biscuits?
So David said, with regards to the bell peppers bit, I think it's like a magic eye picture. The minute someone else puts a word to it, I realise that was what I was smelling, if that makes sense. And yes, it totally does make sense. Sometimes it's a perception thing. You've got this nagging thing going on in the back of your head, and it's like, oh, how do I describe that? And someone just says the right word, and suddenly, like, that's it. That hit the nail on the head. But there is that also that auto-suggestion part of it, where you might suddenly start tasting or sensing something you weren't before. And then you have to wonder, is it really there, or is it just the suggestibility of someone saying it?
Yeah, it's the pepper thing is really common in coffee beers. I don't precisely understand the chemistry behind it, but it does come out quite a lot.
So in the coffee world, I would associate it with over extraction, and that can either be too long a time with the brew in contact with the coffee, or the temperature level. So I was having a read the other day about I think some of this can come from when you use the coffee in the beer brewing process, whether you put it in the boil or whether you put it in the fermenter. Fermenter seems to be preferable, and I think it's one of those extra ingredients that you need to keep an eye on and pull out the bag once it gets to the point that you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the couple of times I've done them, I've just put cracked beans in the fermenter, but sometimes I have ended up with the green pepper thing.
So, what do people think? Should we move on to scoring it, or or is there more you want to talk about on the aroma?
I think we can start getting some scores in. We'll keep chatting while people put some suggestions in.
Okay, so scoring out of 12 points based on its similarity to the base style, what do people think the scores for this should be? So just as a reminder, the things we're looking for is a moderate to high roast, like coffee, dark chocolate, or lightly burnt grain. Low to medium fruitiness. May have a sweet aroma or molasses, licorice, dried fruit, or Venus aromatics. I'll get my teeth in a minute and help talk proper. Stronger versions can have a subtle, clean aroma of alcohol. Low earthy herbal or floral hop aromas are optional, and also optional is low diacetyl. So if it hits all of those boxes, and as this is a spice herb or veg beer, you can also detect the addition from the coffee, then that would be 12 points. If any of those things are missing, then you start knocking points off.
The one thing we probably need to do while people putting the scores in is we have a lot of good descriptors in here, but I think we need to concentrate a bit more on getting those levels in as well.
Yeah.
Are these aromas at a low, medium, high, very high level? Because for this case, I'd probably describe the roast level as maybe moderate. And then
Um,
quite a high level of sweetness from what I'm detecting.
yeah, I'll be tempted to go with you. I think it's like moderately coming from the chocolate, plus then you got the from the roast, then you got the addition of the coffee on top. Yeah, that would sound good to me. So Matthew says he gets green pepper in coffee beers a lot, but this actually has almost a sweet red or piquant pepper, and he finds it quite pleasant.
Yeah, the pepper thing is not necessarily an unpleasant thing all the time. It's a low level. Um, yeah, I think I'd still go with green, but I can get where you're going with the sweet peppers.
So
I mean, it's interesting to say that even though you're getting those aromas, you find them pleasant as well, because it's very easy to jump to the conclusion that the extra ingredient, it should smell and taste like that extra ingredient. But there's always the potential that it is adding something that you wouldn't expect, that is pleasant.
So we've had a couple of nines in from Brian and Matthew. See, James said hello earlier. No, that was you, James. I'm just scrolling down the list, and it's like seeing all these different pictures, and it's like, oh, hang on, no, that's you. um, so, are you happy to give it a score, James? I know. I don't know if we said before, James isn't a qualified judge. He's here as a guest to share his impressions and experience. But if he's happy to give us a score, I'd love to know what you think of it.
So I'm going to be really mean, and I would actually go in the 7 or 8 area, because I can't shake the idea of the bell pepper thing being an off flavor for me. But yes, it's just hard to disassociate with. This should smell like coffee, and to me, it does not smell like coffee.
I think I'd agree with you that the bell peppers is probably more than I'd like. A little bit is fine, but as soon as you gets to be a fairly core ingredient,
everything behind it is fine.
Yeah.
And you, Rich, what do you reckon?
I think I'm on an 8. I think on this one. Once again, I think the balance between roast and sweet is a bit too far to the sweet. And yeah, there's that bit of green pepper in there.
Okay. Yeah, 8 sounds about the money for me. It's not quite there on a couple of things that you've already pointed out. I mean, one way to improve it would have been to enter it as coffee and bell pepper with a base style. and then you'd certainly say, yes, I'm getting all the ingredients you've declared. And that's one of the important things, whether you're entering a beer or judging it. If someone's declared that this ingredient is in there, and that's why it's spice, herb, and veg, you've got to be able to say that you can detect it in there. Otherwise, you need to mark it down.
The effect of it. So in some cases, it can be something that's quite a synergistic effect with something else.
Yeah.
So more in things like the seasonal beers. Some of those you probably couldn't pick out the individual ones, but you know what that combo tastes like. Because autumn beers being American pumpkin spices, Christmas beers being classic Christmas spices, you probably could pick out 2 or 3 of them, but there may be 5 in there. But you couldn't necessarily get all of them. So they build to a whole. So yeah, in the general description on entering specialty beers, it does say not taste. You might not be able to individually taste specialty ingredients when there's multiple ones in there. Combination contributes to greater character, the varied intensities to a pleasant tasting experience. So you should be able to go. Yeah, I think there's probably some of that in there, but not necessarily pick out the individual tastes.
I mean, another example like that is vanilla. At some levels, it can just bring a nice sort of suggested sweetness to something without actually really hitting you in the face and tasting of vanilla.
The other place where you don't care whether you can taste them, what is if the ingredients potential allergen. So if it's a coconut beer and you can't pick out coconut, they've declared coconut among other things, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
And Brian T knocked off a couple as he's not getting the espresso as much as he thought he ought to have. And I mean, it is a fair one, especially if you're selling it as an espresso stout. You'd expect it to be very prominent in the beer. All right, shall we move on to appearance then? Nice and quick one. We're not going to beleaguer it because we're only talking about 3 points here. If you can tell us what you're seeing for the colour, the clarity, and the head retention, colour and texture. So again, think.
Sarah.
Sorry, Richard.
We're talking over each other again. One thing about coffee beers in particular with appearance is there are some oils in coffee in some coffees. So I don't know what everyone else's head looks like on their beers, but mine's quite small for an extra stout. In my case, it's almost disappeared, but I can see more on James's than there is on mine.
Yeah. So I've got a bit of a sort of a halo of head going on here. It's dissipated in the middle, but I've still got this lovely tan, quite tight head around the edge.
Yeah, much the same here.
Yeah, a little bit left on the edge. There wasn't much even when I first poured it. It was a bit more than that, but not a huge amount.
Yeah, when I poured mine, I think I had about a finger of this dark tan head.
Yeah. The style is large tan to brown head with good retention, and you could argue that that's not great retention, but once again, it's out of 3 points.
Yeah. And what about the foam texture? I mean, for me, it was...
There's a little bit of lacing going on as well when you...
Yeah. Let's give it a spin and have a look. I am getting a bit of lacing on the glass left, yeah. I'm also getting quite clingy to the glass, isn't it? It's not like running legs, but it's quite sticky on the glass as you spin it.
So what we got here, we've got very dark brown, opaque, tan brown head. Yeah, that's a good description. Probably worth talking a bit about the texture of the head.
Yeah, what were the bubbles like? Were there a lot of tight, small ones, a load of big, loose ones?
I like this one from Brian. The short-lived, low, loose beige head has been gone for many minutes.
Yeah, I mean, my one, I poured it, like I say, started with the finger, but within like 30 seconds, it was down to this halo that I've got now.
And the lacing that I'm getting as well, it sort of drops back in quite quickly. It doesn't hang around on the side of the glass.
Right. So should we quickly move on to scores then? Because I don't want to take too long on appearance, simply because we're already like 23 minutes in and we've got the main section still to come. So out of 3 points, how does this beer stack up to a very deep brown to black in colour beer? Clarity is usually obscured by a deep colour. Clear if not opaque. Large tan to brown head with good retention. Bearing in mind any changes that the fruit, the spice herb veg edition could have made, like the oils that Rich has already mentioned.
And we did other beers, you will see things like colour changes. So if this was a fruit beer and they added cherries to not a stout, but something else, something pale, obviously that would change the colour.
Yeah, I mean, think of a raspberry wheat, for example.
And 30A says that some ingredients may impact head retention as well. So it's called out as an allowable thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So we've got 1 and 3 in so far.
Yep, 3 from Brian T, 3 from Matthew. Would seem harsh to knock a third for head retention.
I think I fundamentally agree with Matthew here. 3 obviously seem harsh. Yeah, I agree with it being harsh to knock a point off the head retention.
Yeah, I can't see anything else particular. I mean, I haven't looked to see if it's what it's like when you shine a light through it. Will that show up on camera? No. I mean, it is opaque. I mean, I can't see the torch through it, so... clarity doesn't even come into it because you can't see. Oh, David obviously did see clarity. Where was it? I thought the clarity and head retention warranted one less.
It is valid score. 1 point here is fair enough. I tend towards not marking much down for clarity for competition beers in particular, because God knows what's happened to them on the way to get to you. They're usually treated much better at the competition now, but they will have been in Pass and Force or someone worse.
Kicked around the warehouse.
Unless, of course, they end up with a completely clear New England IPA or something.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it would be a 3, but I think if you're 2 or 3, you're doing good.
Yeah. I can't see any yeast in this as well, so like I'd expect clarity to be pretty damn good as well.
From the fact it's a Japanese beer, and Japanese craft beers are pretty much without yeast.
Yeah. Cool. Flavour then, and this is the big one, a lot to talk about. We're going to be scoring out of 20 points in the end, but we're talking about the malt, the hops, fermentation characteristics, balance, finish aftertaste, other flavour characteristics. And again, we want to be talking about not just what you're tasting, but how much of it and what type of it. So it's like, when we were talking earlier, people were smelling coffee. It was trying and drill down into it a bit. What type of coffee? How's the coffee being processed? How much of it are you getting? So think along those lines, and let's see some descriptors. I know we've got WHBC have got their club night tonight, so quite a few of our regulars are out there. So there's not as many of us tonight, but it'd still be good to get everyone's impressions.
So from our assumption of base style, we're looking at moderate to high roast light coffee, surprise, dark chocolate or lightly burnt grey, though without sharp bites, low to medium esters, medium to high bitterness, moderately dried finish, moderate earthy herbal or floral hop flavour is optional, and medium low diacetyl is optional as well. And obviously, on top of that, we are looking for our specialty ingredient.
So Brian's in. Medium burnt bread crust like malt. Moderate bitter coffee. Low to medium dark treacle on that you got on the nose is also getting in flavour. Low to moderate sweet dark crystal or chocolate malt notes. No discernible hop bitterness or expression. So there's some good descriptors in there. Let's get me laughing gear around it and see.
I can certainly agree with almost all of those descriptors at slightly different levels for me, but that's just a personal thing. Maybe using descriptors of beer ingredients is always an interesting one. I tend not to, but I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, definitely agree on the no hop. I'm not getting any hop or anything that I'll put down to a hop derived flavour.
Yeah, I think there's some hop derived bitterness in the aftertaste, along with the astringency from the roast. But yeah, I'm not getting any sort of herbal or spicy or even floral aromas.
So I think I am getting something floral, not full on like hop floral, but at the same time I don't think it's a flavour I would associate with the coffee directly. So maybe it's an interplay of the two, and it's almost presenting a bit like rose water in low levels to me.
Okay. I think that may be one of the flavours you're particularly sensitive to that sort of area, because I know you've used that descriptor before in other areas. Times we've talked. this kind of area.
So David's come in saying that the coffee really lingers on the palate, and he likes that if he's honest. Well, I won't call you a liar because I quite like it as well.
I much prefer the flavors to the aromas as well. That vegetable thing that I was getting on the nose is not carrying through to the palate, and I'd even go as far as saying that it's probably working quite well with it once it's in your mouth.
Yeah, I can go with that. So Matthew's moderate coffee flavour, not espresso though. Some molasses and a low earthy hop with moderate bitterness. So Matthew's getting some low earthy hop there. David's in with dark toast crust, brown sugar sweetness, low dark and rich dark roast coffee that lingers, moderate bitterness but from the coffee and not the hops.
I like the brown sugar. I mean, I'd probably have gone for a dark caramel, but it's the same sort of idea. A sort of sugary with a bit of cooking to it, or a bit of the molasses side to it.
Go heavily down the coffee side of things as well. I don't know how many people are familiar with Vietnamese coffee, where it's a very slow brew dripped into condensed milk. So the play of the sort of thick, more sort of dark fruit coffee flavors with the sort of caramelized invert sugars that you get in the condensed milk. That's sort of what I'm getting that interplay as.
Yeah, certainly go with some sort of I like the condensed milk sort of feeling. So there's a sort of creamy flavour as well as mouthfeel there.
Yeah, it certainly plays into the mouthfeel.
I might have gone towards milk chocolate, perhaps something along those lines. So I think we were talking about the same sort of thing, just describing it slightly differently.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this Vietnamese coffee, but I think I want to be by the sound of it.
Yeah.
So Brian T says dry and bitter cold brew coffee on the finish, and I think I'll probably agree. To me, it's got more the presentation of a cold brew than an espresso.
So that's a Vietnamese brewer, by the way, thin brewer.
Let's number 6. Put you on the big screen so people can see.
Yeah, little tiny thing that you cover my face so that it hopefully focuses on it. No. So yeah, a little tiny thing. Lots of little holes in the bottom, and you have very, very slow brews, and there's flavors that you get out of coffee with those really long filter brews that you just don't get with espresso or with a conventional filter coffee. So it's an interesting place to explore that gets different flavors, different aromas.
How's that affect the acidity of the brew, or haven't you really noted?
A lot sweeter.
Right.
A lot sweeter. You get a lot more natural sweetness out of it. The same with there's a little brass-coloured brewer at the back here that's a South Indian drip. And again, you've got like these sometimes like up to 16-minute long brews, which is insane for a filter. But you get a really thick, almost espresso-like, but not quite, brew out of them. So worth an explore.
Excellent.
So David says he was admiring your collection of coffee equipment in the background, James. He's such a coffee snob, but probably not to your level.
Excellent.
So what do people think? They like the flavour?
Where do people think it balances out, and does it actually compare to the description we've got?
So let me just bring up the description again. So moderate to high roast like coffee, dark chocolate or lightly burnt grain, although without a sharp bite. Low to medium esters, medium to high bitterness. Moderately dry finish. Moderate earthy herbal or floral hop flavour is optional. Medium to low diacetyl optional.
And then we add in from the spice herb and vegetable Distinctive spice over vegetable flavour should be noticeable, may range in intensity from subtle to aggressive. Some are inherently bitter and may result from being more bitter than declared style. Bitterness, hop and malt flavours, alcohol content, and fermentation byproducts such as ester should be appropriate for base style, but harmonious and balanced with distinctive spice over vegetable.
So yeah, let's give it a score then. Out of 20, 20 if it hits all those things for you. Bearing in mind that we're comparing it to the style when we're thinking about, is the malt there? Are the hops there or not there as described? Fermentation characteristics like your esters, your balance, etc. If that's all to style, it's 20 points. If you're knocking points off, have in your mind a reason for it. Because when we come to the feedback section, then you'll be able to say, do this, this, and this.
We have Brian in with a 15. It lives fairly well up to guidelines. Scoring at 15. Matt Chuku was high for base style, doesn't quite fulfill the espresso label, so 16.
Okay, a 15 and a 16. Let me just give it another thing and I'll go first instead of everyone thinking I'm just copying what Richard says. I mean, for me, I think it would be a 16. I'm not getting anything that it says shouldn't be there. I am getting a little bit of that bell pepper still. That I'm not sure if that's from the flavour or the aroma affecting the flavour. The espresso isn't prominent enough for me for something described as an espresso as the main name of the thing. An espresso stout I'd expect to have a lot more obvious espresso punch, if that makes sense. James or Rich?
On that front as well, when you're presented with a beer that's in the category, how do you, is it listed the ingredients? Is it listed what the overall composition is supposed to be?
So for a spice herb and vegetable, you usually get a list of what the ingredients were. Some of the other styles in the category, like autumn seasonal beer, you might get a list of the category, or you might just expect it to taste like a pumpkin beer. But Christmas, the Christmas ones, there's winter season, I think it's called now, which is winter seasonal. But for some of the rest of these, the specialty spice beer, this one, you will almost certainly get a list of ingredients. And as we say, you mightn't be able to pick them all out, but so long as you get the impression that it's there and you're fairly certain it's adding something, then that's all good.
And based on that, then I think I'm going to go quite high. I'm going to go 18 because I don't think it's certainly one of the best that I've had of the style. It's not presenting as espresso, but it's certainly presenting as coffee to me. And it's certainly working in harmony with the flavors. They're not competing with each other. My only complaint is there's a sort of slight brightness on the finish that I don't think quite fits with the rest of the flavor trail through it. And the sweetness is quite basic. But yes, I'm getting treacle, I'm getting sort of those toffee-like flavors, but they're really quite flat in their presentation.
Yeah, I think I'd end up somewhere lower, probably around 15. I'll be humming higher somewhere between 14 and 16. I just think it misses the base style a bit. I'm not really getting medium to high bitterness or a moderately dry finish, but the coffee's quite nice. So this is partially the base style we chose. It could potentially have gone somewhere else, which may be something we can talk about later on. I just don't think it quite hits the base style. I think it's a bit sweet in its finish.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can talk about afterwards. Brian's in saying the touch of spicy phenolic left on my tongue was knocking points off for him, and the slight letdown of the lack of punchy espresso I would expect from it, but well brewed beer.
Yeah, I think in this case the espresso may be a bit of a marketing thing.
Yeah, quite likely.
Expect it's a coffee beer. This does not taste like espresso. It's a coffee beer. I'd expect something different if they'd actually made vast quantities of espresso. I'd love to see an espresso machine big enough to make it for a batch of beer.
Yeah, that could be quite interesting. Okay, next up, mouthfeel. So, body, carbonation, warmth, creaminess, astringency, and any other palate sensations. So remember, we're not just saying thing, it's like big thing or little thing, and what type of thing. So it's a small, tiny thing, hardly detectable, or a lot of very punchy whatever.
So what we have here in the base style is medium full to full body, often with a smooth, sometimes creamy character. May have a warming but not hot alcohol presence, moderate to moderately high carbonation.
I'm going to double down on my my Vietnamese coffee thing before, because I'm getting that lovely creamy sort of sweet mouthfeel that I would associate with condensed milk, and that certainly carries through.
Yeah, I'd definitely be writing creaminess in there at least a moderate, if not a high level. It's one of those ones you get in a few beers. This sort of style is a more likely area. So from Brian, we've got low creaminess, low alcohol, warmth, medium to full body.
Yeah.
It lingers as well. The creaminess lingers right on the back of your tongue.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, David earlier said that the coffee really lingers on the palate as well. So I think it's both of those things that are doing it. You get that coffee hanging back there and the creaminess.
Mm.
Excuse me whilst I just pelt down what's left of this and open the other bottle, so I'm checking the carbonation level.
Yeah, I think that's the only place that I have a query on it is carbonation level. As David says, I don't think it's anywhere near moderate to high carbonation, low to moderate at best. Yeah. So I don't think it's to the detriment of the beer. Yeah, it might be interesting. So if the carbonation was up a bit, you might lose a bit of that creaminess, but it might bring through some of the other flavours. Let's see what a fresh pot from Sarah brings carbonation wise, because these have been sat here for like 40 minutes so far.
That herby bell pepper thing's a lot more notable when you first open the bottle as well.
Yes.
Just open this one and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, really getting it. So where were we? Moderate. I'd say it's the low end of moderate, if it's moderate at all. Even on a fresh one, I'd moderate low, perhaps. But yeah, I wouldn't call it moderate, but it's not far off at the very bottom end of moderate. So where were we? We talked about that one from Matthew. Medium full body, no warming, some creaminess, no astringency, which I think is a big positive for this style. I'll agree, I'm not getting any astringency. I'm getting a little bitterness from the coffee and from the hop. But I don't know what the other folks on stream when we think about that.
Yeah. One thing I'd say is that the carbonation is lower than expected, but I think that it's probably quite hard when you've got so many bitter components to it, with the coffee and with the choice of malt that goes into this style, and the hop levels that are expected. It's probably something's got to give at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we've seen that earlier on with the relatively low hop flavors and aromas, and I think that's probably why they've chosen to go a bit lower on the carbonation as well. Though the points aren't really gone. We can't really give them the points for it if they've even if we can guess why they've done it.
I mean, I've noticed it in quite a few of the Japanese craft beers as well. They do seem to go for the lower carbonation rather than the higher end. So it's, especially when you're a commercial brew, you're brewing not to style, you're brewing to market. Because the commercial brewery that can't sell their beer doesn't stay commercial very long. So yeah, it's like we've picked a style for this and told you it's been entered into a competition as this style with a special ingredient. They're not bothered about the style when they brew it, so they've probably never even heard of the style, to be fair.
Yeah, a lot of them are familiar with more of the BA set styles, which are similar but not quite the same. Which is the American Brewers Association, which are the ones used at the American JBF. American BFS, not GBBF, which is our one. As opposed to the homebrew ones, they're closely related because of the way the organisation's developed, but they're not quite the same.
So I got a question on the screen from Brian. He said a while back, and I meant to address it at the time and got carried away drinking the beer. Anyone get a slight slick feeling? Probably coffee oils on the palate.
I can see where you're coming from now. My mind is part of the sort of creaminess of it, but yeah, I could go with slightly slick as another descriptor of it.
Yeah, I was thinking it's probably the creaminess as well.
I'd be careful to attribute that to the coffee oils, though. Certainly, the oils that you see on coffees, if they've not removed them somehow in their process, I think at the levels of coffee flavour that we are getting, and certainly the levels of coffee aroma that we're getting, I don't think you'd just be getting slickness. You'd be getting no head whatsoever, and you'd be getting that sort of oil slick look on the top of it. So
rainbow.
I think some of that slickness might be an association thing and down to other things in the coffee.
So Brian agrees with Matthew about no astringency. And David's come in with full body, mild creaminess that gives a pleasant mouthfeel, no astringency, but a nice dry finish. So what do other people think about the finish? Any balance between bitterness, sweetness, and what was the other one? The any other palate sensations or warmth? Has everyone covered everything?
Someone mentioned a touch of alcohol earlier, I think. Where was that?
So
someone said low alcohol warm.
Low alcohol warm.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, I can go with a touch of alcohol. It's for this is 7%. It's there, but it's quite restrained, which is good in my opinion for that. So should we go on to more scores?
Yep. So
out of 5.
Out of 5. And the target is medium full to full body, often with a smooth, sometimes creamy character. May have a warming but not hot alcohol presence. Moderate to moderately high carbonation. And for the SHV, it says it varies by base style. SHVs may increase or decrease body. Some SHVs may add a bit of astringency, although a raw spice character is undesirable.
So I guess what they're talking about with raw spice character is like a bite to it.
It could be, or it could be that you've actually used spices in the beer. So if you've put, for instance, cinnamon or chili or something in, normally that's much more noticeable what a raw spice character is for those. Matthew thinks the beer is balanced. It lingers a bit, not dry, but no sticky sweetness. Brian gives it a 4. Oh, four looks popular.
Yeah. I think I probably agree with 4. With the comment being on the carbonation level. If that was the declared style, which obviously doesn't have to be, we would just pick that one for it. Most of these stout styles do have at least moderate carbonation. From memory, maybe milk stout doesn't. I think milk stout still does. He says.
I can't remember, and I won a medal with the milk stout. I should know.
Sweet stout. Yeah, no, sweet stout can be low to moderate carbonation, but then obviously 7% is pushing it for a sweet stout.
Yeah.
And you come out at about 6.
Yes, same for me. I'll go 4. It has to lose something for the carbonation level for me against the style guide. But other than that, it hits all the things on the head. I love the body on this. For a 7%, I'd associate that sort of body with normally bigger beers than 7%. So yeah, it's on the money for a 4.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's definitely a 4 for me. It's that carbonation, but that sort of thick, luxurious body is really lovely with this beer.
Right, moving on then. Overall impression. Let's lose the question. Right, overall drinking pleasure associated with the entry, and give your suggestions for improvement. So this is where you give the brewer the chance to shine, tell him why you've knocked the points off and how to do it better. Again, if you're doing this for reals or for the exam, remember not to make any assumptions about processes or ingredients that haven't been declared.
When you're marking these normally, you're looking quite strongly at the description of the beer you've been given. So you're thinking sort of reading from spice, herb, or vegetable. You're thinking about the declared concept rather than to actually pick out ingredients and things. So balance, drinkability, execution are the most important deciding factors. The spice, herb, and veg should complement the original style, not overwhelm it. So in this case, I mean, if this had been declared as an espresso stout, I would probably be the harsher on them than if it was declared as a coffee stout. So you need to be at least entering it as what it tastes like, and that's we say enter it as what it tastes like pretty much every week, in some form or other.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if it's been declared as espresso, then you're expecting espresso. If it's been declared as coffee, any detectable coffee beyond the coffee character that you'll get from a dark roast malt anyway would count.
Now, one thing to think about here is whether the base style is the right one. Obviously, we just picked this one because it tasted about right when I tried it yesterday, and it matches the ABV. But there are other options out there. I mean, I could sort of see this as a coffee tropical stout, though it's a little bit too bitter, or maybe a coffee American stout. It'd be interesting if anyone had any other thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely... Oh, sorry, go on, James.
We spoke about this a little bit before the call, because I think myself and Sarah haven't tried it before. And having tried it now, I wouldn't go with the American stout style. I don't think it plays on the hops enough for it to go down that alley. I think, yeah, foreign extra is probably about the closest that we're going to get as a base.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, for me, it's got a bit of sweetness that might just edge it over into tropical. But that's one of the things when it comes to this section. Never be afraid to say, this is what you've scored. You might want to consider maybe a different base style next time and just say if you had entered this as something else or whatever. Because, I mean, that's always a suggestion for improvement. If the beer doesn't fit the style they've entered it as, or in this context, what we've told you it is, then suggesting they enter it as a different style can vastly improve the beer if it's the wrong style.
Mhm.
So Matthew's come in. A really nice beer, drinks well. For an espresso beer, would like more depth of coffee flavour with richer roast. Sounds like giving the brewer a light roasting there. Yeah. I mean, you've explained how the beer drinks to you. You've said what you think about it. Normally, I'd say I haven't been keeping account of how many points you've knocked off, but normally I'd say for every 4 or 5 points you knock off, you should have at least one suggestion for improvement. So if you've knocked off sort of multiple points over the period, try and come up with more ways for the brewer to improve the beer. After all, for most people entering a competition, that's what they're entering for, is to get that feedback for how to win the medal the next time.
Yeah, it's this block that people read the most into, the feedback section. So it's always good to try and put a lot of as much helpful stuff in there as you can. People will just not believe you, and it won't be true. But you will quite regularly hit something when you talk to the people afterwards that they've actually done or has actually gone wrong, which is always gratifying when that happens. We've got like 5 minutes left, so should we put in the scores at the same time?
Yeah, so if you can give us your scores for the beer's overall impression, which was out of, was it 10? I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, 10. And the final scores for 50, bearing in mind the scoring guide on the screen, where you think this beer fits. So if you think it's an outstanding beer, it should add up to 45 to 50. If you think it's excellent, 38 to 44. This is where I normally start with my scores. In my head, I've got a picture of where I want it to end up, and I work it out based on that. Just sort of before I write all the scores in, fiddling them between the sections to make them add up to put it in the right bucket for me, if that makes sense.
I tend to do it the other way around, is I just put in the scores, see what they add up to, and go, that's a bit too high, I need to adjust a couple of them. So that's how you like it. So what have we got in here? We've got from Brian, well executed beer considered higher carbonation, more espresso character. Matthew's agreeing with the carbonation. Brian's agreeing with an 8.
Yeah, Brian with an 8. Matthew with an 8.
Really nice beer, coffee flavored beer, more forwards as an espresso beer. I'd like the recipe. That used to be a checkbox. I'm not sure it is on all the score sheets anymore. Probably add some lactose or some oats through it yourself. Yeah, which will probably push it into a different style, but that's quite an interesting suggestion. We probably want to be commenting that this fits in between these styles a bit. Maybe that way to go one way, that way to go the other. Where else we've got? We've got an overall impression of 8 from Matthew, and final score 39 from David, and same from Brian. Assuming the maths is right. That's what proctors are there just to check your maths for you, as well as do all the other vitally important things in competitions. But when you're doing the exam, double check your maths, especially on the last few beers once you've had a couple.
And then Matthew's coming in with a 40, which he says seems fair to him. Right, so final scores from a panel of judges or tasters on the stream. What do you think? Where's it fitting for you?
So for me, my overall impression ended up at 7, talking a bit about the balance from the flavour and the coffee being quite restrained at there, which is fine, which is on the edge of adding much to the beer. It may be detectable, but because it's a stout, that could come from all sorts of places. And that ends me up at an overall score of 37.
Okay. So let me just have a look again.
Just on the edge of very good to excellent, which is sort of where I want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll probably go about 39. just at the bottom of excellent. We're only a few points out. My main talking points there would be carbonation. I'd like to see that higher. I'd like to see more rich coffee punch. If we're describing it as espresso beer, you really want to get that espresso character in the beer, and I'm just not getting espresso. They're the main things that I'll be pointing out. Personally, I would have preferred just a little more bitterness in there as well, a little bit more hop bitterness, not coffee. I think that would have just helped balance it out a little bit better, because for me it's a little bit too sweet for a a foreign extra. It's pushing a bit more towards the sweetness of a tropical for me. So that would be my talking points. Your thoughts, James?
Yes, 6 for me, and I'd go back and I'd knock a point off one of my earlier ones. So that lands me at 37, just because I don't think I could push it into the excellent area. Just the initial impression of it with the aroma when you put it up to your nose and you get those, like we say, those bell pepper aromas, they're just not really there for me. I'm not really for that, but on the mouth, on the flavour, the mouthfeel, I really quite liked it. Again, like we say, a little bit more carbonation, but they've done very good to get this as harmonious as they have when you're drinking it, and yeah.
Cool. Well, we're just past the hour, so thank you very much for joining in, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show this week, and we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for watching.
Remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching Daft Cat Brewing.